Every great leader carries scars, scars of failures, rejections, poverty, and heartbreaks. Abraham Lincoln, one of the greatest presidents of the United States, was not born into greatness. His journey to the White House was carved through relentless struggle, unimaginable losses, and years of perseverance. To understand Lincoln the president, we must first understand Lincoln the struggler, the man who stumbled time and time again, but refused to give up. This is the untold story of Abraham Lincoln's struggles before he became the 16th President of the United States. A story of poverty, heartbreak, depression, rejection, and resilience. Abraham Lincoln was born on February 12, 1809, in a one-room log cabin in Hardin County, Kentucky. His parents, Thomas and Nancy Lincoln, were poor farmers who barely managed to survive. Life in the early 19th century frontier was harsh. Lincoln often recalled that his childhood could be described in one phrase: the short and simple annals of the poor. Unlike many leaders born into wealth or privilege, Lincoln had no such advantage. His family moved frequently, escaping poverty and land disputes, eventually settling in Indiana. Lincoln's education was limited. He attended school for less than a year in total. Yet, even as a child, he had a hunger for knowledge. He would walk miles to borrow books, often reading by the dim light of a fireplace late into the night. This hunger for self-improvement became the cornerstone of Lincoln's life. But despite his thirst for learning, the world around him was unkind, forcing him to grow up fast. When Lincoln was only 9 years old, his mother, Nancy, died of milk sickness, a disease caused by drinking contaminated milk. The loss was devastating. For a young boy already living in hardship, losing his mother meant losing his source of comfort and affection. This early tragedy planted in Lincoln a deep sense of melancholy, a sadness that would follow him for life. Yet, instead of breaking him, it pushed him to seek meaning and purpose. By his teenage years, Lincoln was known for his extraordinary physical strength. Tall, lean, and muscular, he worked as a farmhand, rail splitter, and later as a flatboatman traveling down the Mississippi River. He often earned just a few cents a day, giving most of his wages to his father. But while others saw only hardship, Lincoln saw opportunity. On those long boat trips, he was exposed to the wider world, including the cruel reality of slavery in the South. Witnessing chained men and women being bought and sold left a permanent scar on his conscience. These experiences shaped his moral compass and would later fuel his determination to end slavery. At 23, Lincoln took his first step into politics, running for the Illinois General Assembly in 1832. With almost no education, no money, and no powerful family connections, his chances were slim. He lost badly. But Lincoln was undeterred. He once said, "My great concern is not whether you have failed, but whether you are content with your failure." This mindset became his guiding principle. Instead of giving up, he sharpened his skills. He borrowed books on law, taught himself mathematics, history, and politics, and began speaking at local gatherings. His charisma and storytelling ability soon won people over. By 1834, just 2 years after his first defeat, Lincoln was elected to the Illinois state legislature as a member of the Whig Party. It was a small victory, but for Lincoln, it was proof that perseverance paid off. While his political career slowly took root, Lincoln's personal life was filled with heartbreak. In 1835, he fell deeply in love with Anne Rutledge, a young woman from New Salem, Illinois. Their relationship blossomed, and Lincoln dreamed of marrying her. But tragedy struck again. Anne died suddenly of typhoid fever. Lincoln was shattered. Friends worried he would not recover. Some even feared he might take his own life. This period of deep depression became known as Lincoln's darkest days. He would carry this melancholy throughout his life, often describing himself as the most miserable man living. Years later, he married Mary Todd, but even that relationship was filled with tension, misunderstandings, and quarrels. Lincoln's home life was rarely peaceful, adding another layer to his personal struggles. Lincoln was ambitious but not always successful. Before becoming a lawyer, he tried his hand at business, opening a general store with a partner. Unfortunately, the business failed, leaving him in significant debt he spent years repaying. He often joked about this period, saying he was so poor that he had to carry his law books in his hat because he couldn't afford a bag. But beneath the humor was a man who refused to let financial failure define him. With no formal education, Lincoln taught himself law by reading borrowed books. In 1836, he passed the bar exam and became a lawyer. At first, clients were scarce. He struggled financially, often riding on horseback from town to argue small cases in rural courthouses. But Lincoln had something special: integrity. He was so honest that he earned the nickname, Honest Abe. He often returned extra money to clients if he felt they had overpaid, and he never argued a case he didn't believe in. Over time, his reputation grew. He became one of the most respected lawyers in Illinois, admired not just for his skill, but for his character. Lincoln's journey into national politics was anything but smooth. In 1843, he failed to secure the Whig nomination for Congress. In 1846, he finally won and served a single term in the U.S. House of Representatives. But his opposition to the Mexican-American War made him unpopular, and he lost support in his party. After his term, he returned to Springfield, Illinois, effectively sidelined from national politics for years. During this period, Lincoln doubted himself. His law practice thrived, but his dream of making a difference through politics seemed to be slipping away. The 1850s brought a new national crisis: the expansion of slavery into Western territories. The Kansas-Nebraska Act, which allowed new states to decide on slavery themselves, reignited Lincoln's passion for politics. He spoke out fiercely against slavery, not just as a moral wrong, but as a threat to America's democratic ideals. His powerful speeches, filled with logic and moral conviction, brought him back into the spotlight. But even then, he faced defeats. In 1855, he ran for the U.S. Senate and lost. In 1858, he ran again, this time against the famous Senator Stephen A. Douglas. The two engaged in a series of debates that became legendary. Though Lincoln lost the Senate race, his eloquence and moral clarity won him national attention. For the first time, people outside Illinois began to see him as a serious leader. By 1860, Lincoln had faced the death of his mother, crushing poverty, multiple business failures, the death of the woman he loved, deep depression, and repeated political defeats. And yet, each struggle forged him into a man of resilience, empathy, and determination. He knew the pain of failure, so he understood the struggles of ordinary Americans. When he finally secured the Republican nomination for president in 1860, it wasn't because he was the most experienced or wealthy candidate. It was because people trusted him. They believed in his honesty, his perseverance, and his vision for a united America. On November 6, 1860, Abraham Lincoln was elected as the 16th President of the United States. The boy who grew up in poverty, who lost his mother, who failed in business, who faced heartbreak and depression, and who suffered countless defeats. had finally risen to the highest office in the land. But Lincoln's story is not just history. It is a lesson for all of us. Life will bring struggles, failures, and heartbreaks. But as Lincoln's life shows, failure is not the end. It is the foundation of greatness. As Lincoln once said, "I am a slow walker, but I never walk back." And that is why Abraham Lincoln remains not just a president, but an eternal symbol of resilience and hope.